The employee electronic record brings together data about a single employee from all the different 70 modules that exist in Interact HRMS. So instead of having to enter this data onto the record itself is populated automatically based on the actions done by HR department and by other users in the system. For example, if an employee is hired, the system will update the employee electronic record with all the details that have been entered during the hiring process, and it will create a job record for the employee which will contain the employee's compensation plan as well as their leave policies, and that compensation plan will include the earnings and allowances and bonuses and commissions and everything that the employee is entitled to, as well as the contract information, the probation details, and so on. It lands on the employee record not by another person entering it in there. It is there automatically once you have hired a person and put them in the system using the contract and hiring module. In the same manner, the system will collect data on education, skills, experience of the employee, and note that each one of these summary lists that you see here are actually backed up with a lot more data, which I can see when I click on the edit or on the view button. You see, this gives me the detail that is behind the first line item, which is the MBA in computer science that this person has. And you can populate all this information the way you like. You have the skills of the employee, the experience of the employee, as I indicated before, the leave records. I also have her competency evaluation, performance reviews, career plan, training records, succession plan, and risks that are monitored for this employee. In addition to that, we'll have an employee history that will show me all her changes in compensation, all her transfers, promotions, demotions, contract amendments, and so on. I have her work schedule and her holiday calendar. I have her timesheets, her automatic timesheet that is run through the payroll, the pay period timesheets. I'll have her payroll details and an audit report showing me any changes that have taken place on Barbara's particular record. The payroll details will show me all of the pay slips that have ever been generated for her. I have her emergency contacts, her address information, her passport details, visa, and dependents. And for each one of these, again, there's a lot of additional information. Let's click on dependents real quick. I've only got one listed here, but when I click on this, it gives me lots of additional information which we can track on your dependents, including their passport and their visa if there's any need for you as a company to be responsible for the visas of dependents of your employees. We also have a miscellaneous tab which includes certification information, military service records, security credentials, patents and publications, and so on. All this data, again, each time backed up by a detailed screen. Here's an example of security credentials. Let me create a new let me look at a new form for that. Here you can see all the details about security credentials for this person. In the same way, we can track any attachments and documents. Keep in mind there is no limit to the number of documents that you can scan and attach to an employee record. Just like we can attach documents with passport copies and visa copies, we can do the same thing here right under certifications. This may be related to medical records, to any other item you want. I'll give you an example of a degree that was copied onto this employee's record. You find right here a certificate that's attached, and if I open this up, I will see the Harvard University certificate or degree. You notice that there's an expiry date and a first issue date and an issue date, which means that we can also generate reports for this and alerts to ensure that you are aware of any expiry. Now, I can control what data should be displayed on this general tab and on all the other tabs too. Right here we can define which fields should be displayed on the general tab of the employee electronic record. As you notice, there is a huge amount of fields and many more right over here. These can be dragged and dropped onto the employee record or away from it, off of it. And you notice that we can choose whether these fields should be mandatory or whether they should be optional, and what the caption should read for that particular field. In addition to that, we can choose the employee profile setup that will appear for the employee through their employee self-service. So we can choose which data we want to display for them and where they should have access. We can also determine whether or not they should have a right to modify any of this data. And let me show you what this looks like. Here you see my employee, the one that we were just looking at, her employee electronic record from the point of view of the HR department. And you notice that she has a right to update her profile. And when we say update her profile, it means that you determine which data she will have access to, as indicated just now, and whether or not she has a right to modify any of this data, and if so, whether or not it should be approved by HR or whether the change will take effect immediately. So the key point is that because, for example, all this miscellaneous information, while it may be very useful for you to know, there is no way that the HR department has time to maintain this data for every single employee. But each individual employee will have the time to make sure that it's up to date and that it's complete. And therefore, you can allow them to do it through their self-service. However, any changes that they make can be subject to approval by HR. And that way, HR retains the control over the integrity of the data, but at the same time, they will collect as much information as possible about their employees so they can make more informed decisions. And that is the whole point of Interact, to have an integrated solution where everybody has some input and the HR department finally has a say over what exactly happens. And through the integration of all these different modules, it becomes very easy to manage that. And because of the fact that this is a portal-based application where everybody's connected and everybody's working off the same database.